and welcome. Anyone who's been to Merchant City Yoga on a Sunday knows how much I love catching up with everyone over a cup of my freshly brewed spiced chai. These Sunday chai sessions really bring everyone together. A true celebration of friendship, community and connection. And as these COVID restrictions continue, I want to try and capture some of that magic and share it with you at home. So I've invited some familiar faces from our MCY family to chat with me online over a cuppa. I'm affectionately calling them the chai sessions. Pop the kettle on, get yourself comfy and come and join us. Hey Anna, thank you so much for coming and joining me in my chai session. Girl chai. You're ready for us? Yeah, we cuppa. And seems to me that every time that we get together these past few months or so, we end up talking about injuries and comparing notes on shoulder injury in particular, and also having a chat about how it's changing our practice, but also how having these longer term injuries is having a really big impact in changing how we teach the yoga postures as well. So I thought it would be quite fun to get together and share some of our chat with everyone. So, I mean, everyone's probably bored of hearing me talk about my shoulder injury, but it's coming up for 2 years now. And, you know, I've done lots of stuff to try and address it. Everything from adapting the practice to stopping posture practice for a while, which, just to be clear, did nothing at all whatsoever to help. Stopping moving did not help. I have seen an osteopath, have seen physios about it as well, and frustratingly there hasn't been a magic bullet, so it's something that I'm still having to kind of live with and work with. And I know from our chats that you have a similar story.
Yes, yeah, I think people who come to my classes have heard this story as well a million times and are sick of me saying, so today we're going to switch it up because my shoulder hurts again. So yes, I broke my clavicle, which is an injury that so many people have many moons ago, and it needed surgery to help it out a little bit. And over the few years after, like, I started feeling a bit of numbness in my fingers and everything. And this has been 8 years now at this point, and I've only got a diagnosis this year for what's happening this summer. So it's very recent, and it's just basically my nerves are being trapped by my own clavicle with certain movements. So over the last few years, again, I didn't know what was happening, why I had that numbness. So it was really hard to alter my practice because I didn't know what I could do, what would trigger the pain, what would send my fingers into tingles, or my whole arm sometimes into tingles. And now I know that it's just, if I raise my arms above my head, that's going to happen. So that's my main trigger. So with so many down dogs in yoga practice, it just makes it the more fun. But yes, my practice, I used to say it has suffered before, and I've started trying to change my own lingo to it's been altered rather than suffered, because what's happened is that I had to find ways to still practice, to still teach, to do what I can, but I just have to work more on variations. So maybe I just need to spend some time when I'm doing my down dog in my own mat going, okay, if I do this, does it feel a bit better? And even if it's not the way we've been taught originally to do it, it doesn't mean it's wrong, because it's what's right for my body and for the situation I'm in. So yes, I've been working a lot with investigating shoulders. I've been doing a lot of my reading, and workshop coming soon. Just thought I'd put it out there.
Absolutely, get it in early.
Get your bookings. It's in the studio, so limited spaces. But yes, I've been reading more about how the joint works and how everything moves and interacts together. Because I had the idea that it's just like ball and socket kind of thing, and your arms just moving within the shoulder, but it's actually a bit more complicated than that. There's a bit more to it. And one thing I never studied was nerves. I've studied ligaments, I've studied tendons, and I've studied muscles. And now I'm really aware that we have nerves, and unfortunately, your clavicle is a passing place for most nerves that connect to the rest of the body. So from your spinal column, you have quite a lot of nerves that go under your clavicle and then spread out to the rest of the body. So working with nerve pain is not that much fun, because your arm can just give out on you. You could be holding a pose and all of a sudden you're not holding it anymore. So I've been focusing more and more on safety, safe practice, rather than pretty practice. I've given up on Instagram and social media and looking pretty on social media, or following like, you have the most amazing poses online, and I've just had to accept that for now, at least, that's not going to be me, because I have to work more on keeping myself safe, but still develop my practice at the same time. So if you look at my down dogs or anything, it might look a bit different to what most people are used to, but that's the way it's working for me. It's just as simple as that is what I'm working with, and
Yeah,
hopefully
it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's an exercise on so many different levels. So because you've already spoken about, it's an exercise in how you talk about practice, like how you talk about your own practice and how you talk about practice when you're teaching it to other people, but also reframing expectations of appearance of a posture, as well, because I mean, we're all guilty of falling into the aesthetic sometimes and looking from the outside, because it's one of the really important feedback mechanisms that we've got. But yeah, so super interesting that it has to be reframed on different levels. Has so much to teach us, Anna.
I know. The things we learned about ourselves, because I remember at some point, not soon after my injury, but a couple of years after, and I was dealing with this pain, and I tried to go to a yoga class, and I found myself, like, I spoke to a teacher, and she said, oh, until we know more about your injury, how about you come to a beginner's class? And oh my God, my ego took a hit. I was really upset over going to beginner's class, because like, no, I know more yoga than that. I don't, why do I have to, am I demoting myself now? I've been practicing for 4 years. Why am I going to a beginner's class? And I got so worked up, and I didn't go to that class because I didn't want to be a beginner again. And well, eventually my shoulder was like, no, you have no way around it. Get on your mat, be a beginner again. Stay like in your down dog, hold it for a while, change your hand position. And it's just like little rotations as well. It's not even that like, I'm making big movements or making a big difference. It's just like, if I rotate my thumb maybe out the way a little bit more, that takes that rotation that my shoulder doesn't like. And well, yeah, ego took a hit and I had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, but for me, it's been like, just, I'm going to say, I'm probably going to overuse the word interesting, because it is all really interesting. So I feel like in trying so many different things over these past 2 years, I'm certainly getting to know my body better and maybe have a little bit more understanding of how some of the body works. I mean, it's obviously a vast topic and very few people know that much, like enough about it, if you like. But for me, one of the things was like, so I love a really strong practice, and I was like, what can I do to still have a strong practice but not aggravate whatever it is that's going on? Because I started in the beginning, I was just adapting a couple of postures like chaturanga. That didn't really do much to help. So we started adapting a little bit more. Eventually got to the point where I took out all weight bearing at all. Like I didn't weight bear at all. So one of the things I did at that point, because I was like, well, what am I going to do? Like, what if I can't bear weight? I'm an Ashtanga practitioner. What can I do? So what I decided to do then was no hands. So I wasn't using hands to get my legs into half lotus or full lotus. I wasn't using my hands to help in any way at all. I was doing the whole practice, no hands, which was, it suddenly got really difficult again, but in a really, really different way. And I think one of the things as well, for me, it's almost like being an Ashtanga practitioner within that kind of method and those sequences. One of the things that's been quite difficult for me is to kind of step outside of that a little bit and do things differently. So kind of be informed from different modalities, like when we've spoken a lot about functional movement, and some of the newer science and studies that's coming out, which is really exciting. So bringing in some of that, but even just doing something completely different. So earlier this year, I started running because, you know, my practice isn't as dynamic as it used to be. I need to be a little bit more cautious. And although after all of this time, I do have quite a strong practice again, or in fact, I do have a strong practice again, and I'm doing the vinyasa and stuff, but I have to be very considered about it. So yeah, I started running earlier this year as well, and it just brings a whole new lens, I suppose, to see your body and understand your body, but also well, why am I practicing? What am I practicing? What am I practicing for? Like, why am I even doing this?
Yeah, I've been having that conversation with a few people, especially with lockdown as well, and everything switching to Zoom. I think there's a few people, not just yogis, but even outside, speaking to my own students at the university, that are struggling with motivation because everything is done through a screen these days. And it's just how finding that fresh perspective on things can change so much. And yeah, you come to your yoga class, but why? But what's the question? Why are you coming to that yoga class? Is it to get some exercise? Is it because it gives you something that you actually really look forward to and you like stepping on your mat, you like being in that spirit with other practitioners? Is it your yamas and niyamas? Like, what brings you to a class? And again, I've been having this conversation with so many people, and there's so many people are like, oh, I don't know why do I do what I do? I'm like, well, only you know the answer. So you really have to think about what brings you to your practice, and if it is because it brings you joy, then does an injury have to stop that joy? Do you really need to go into hiding because you've got an injury, or can you work on variations with a teacher or by yourself and to see what works and bring that joy again? And sometimes even just discovering little things that we can do will bring it back. I get really excited every time I find a pose. I'm like, oh, this feels nice in my body.
Yeah, or like you said, just that little tiny rotation or adjustment that all of a sudden is like, oh, actually, this feels okay again. Then clearly I'm a bit guilty of going, but what if I do it to 100? Or what if I do it in this really crazy arm balance? Like, you know, but with moderation, yeah, it's just the smallest things have made such a big difference.
Yeah, it's small movements, and even just starting out activities like running will make you aware of muscles you didn't know you had.
Oh.
And you'll notice it, especially the first few times you run or that you do a new activity. It's like, oh, wow, what is this pain on this side? It's like in such a specific place I didn't know existed.
Yeah,
So
and one of the things is where I totally caught myself going, oh, but what if running makes me stiff for my yoga practice? And you can imagine what I would say to somebody else saying that to me, but I actually caught myself going, oh, but it's, that, and I'm also doing a functional movement program just now. That is making me stiffer for my practice, I have to say, more than the running is, actually. Hopefully stronger and stable, stiffer, not just not able to move stiffer. Hopefully it's doing its job, because again, that was something else I'm trying to do, is almost like hitting the reset button, because one of the things the physio took me through, and I'm sure yours have done that as well, is like they don't just focus on the shoulder, it's like they start working through the rest of the body to try and pick up imbalances, and you know, quite often the pelvis is a little bit off, and hell, we discovered that one of my feet was working a little bit differently, like my foot and my ankle was working a little bit differently from the other side as well. So I ended up with foot and ankle exercises, which kind of blew my mind a little bit actually, because I was like, hear about my shoulder that's up here. But yeah, the foot and ankle exercises kind of blew my mind. But I'm hoping that that's going to hit reset a little bit as well, because having practiced these asana, these postures in this sequence for a very long time, I've obviously hit patterns that that maybe just aren't so helpful anymore.
Yeah, and there's those patterns that you won't realize are there. I think we're all guilty of that. I still do it. And it's only when something snaps, I was like, oh, darn it, I should have paid more attention to that. Can I say darn it in this call? Sorry.
Yes, you can.
Okay, good. Oh gosh, darn it. But until you're like, oh no, my body doesn't like this anymore, that's when you realize you've got that pattern. And I keep telling everyone, like, practice with a teacher every now and then, just to keep yourself, because there's things you won't pick up on, but someone from the outside will pick up on. Especially now that everyone's returning to the studio, that's the first thing they say is like, oh my goodness, you made a difference there. Yeah, it was a tiny difference, but look at that. Sometimes just like your fingers are here and you're like, just squeeze your shoulder blade and they'll touch, like something as simple as that. But yes, I've lost track of what I was saying. So
yeah, no, because as a teacher, isn't it fantastic to be able to see people in 3D again, and actually in more detail, because the online stuff has been amazing, like just amazing, but to actually see people in a little bit more detail than the small screen allows you to do, I think makes a massive
amount of
difference.
feedback that you can build from it, just from having someone in front of you. I understand why people are still a bit uncomfortable with being in the studio, but it does make a difference for us as well, and what we can see and what we can help with. Whereas on the screen you're like, maybe the foot is off, can't tell. Angle of the camera for this pose is not the best, but you can't really carry your camera as you move between each pose. So we try our best. But yeah, it's just that bit of having someone every now and then in does help.
So I mean, what else do you think that kind of working with your injury over all this time and kind of exploring the body in different ways, what else do you think that has changed about your teaching? I mean, I know we've been geeking out a bit about active and passive stretching.
Yeah, so that's a very big one. I've reconsidered my my passive stretching, and if you don't know what we mean by passive stretching, is basically you're seated in a forward fold and you plummet to the forward fold. Whereas active, it is more you're fighting your own muscles, so you get the muscles engaged and they stop you or slow you down getting into poses. So every now and then you'll find it, I'll say even just a seated forward fold, but you're going to lower very, very slowly onto it. And where your body stops, that's where you're stopping and holding, and maybe without the hands touching the mat for help, because as soon as the hands touch the mat, the body goes, relief. If you keep the hands off the mat, you've got that tension around the muscles. So what I found is passive stretching is not a bad thing, it's not the devil. But it just means that your body is not safeguarding itself, it's not protecting itself when you're going into poses, because what you're saying, you're moving so quickly, you kind of switch off from what you're doing and you just let the pose be the pose. Whereas if it's active stretching, it's more the body working towards getting that pose. There's a little bit more engagement, there's a little bit more firing in the nerves. And when you have this extra firing in the nerves, you have your brain getting feedback from what's going on. So you're more likely to pick up on something that is a bit off than you would if you've just done the passive stretch. And usually is when the teacher comes to do the adjustment, they'll be like, oh no, that's not, no, because you went too far with your stretch. So I've definitely put more active work in my classes and my own practice as well. So
I probably want to be clear as well here, we're talking about passive stretching within the context of a vinyasa based practice. We're not off-roading into yin territory, so we are talking about within a vinyasa based practice. Because for me it's like the body taking the body into the shape or the movement rather than it just letting itself flop or fall into it, and relying on like the musculature and the body to take it into its posture rather than relying on
Gravity.
innate flexibility and gravity to get into what from the outside might look like an amazing shape. But I mean, certainly for me, I've got a little bit more mobility around some of my joints, which is part of my shoulder story that I've got going on. But for me, when it was described as looking for like sensory feedback or proprioceptive feedback, then if you move passively, you don't get that feedback. You've got less feedback from the ground, you've got less feedback from the body about where it is in space as well. And as soon as somebody described it to me like that, I was like, that is exactly what I'm missing, because I can't tell whether my knees are locked out or not. But if I've got activation through the muscles and it's like, you know, my body has placed itself there, then I've got that feedback going on all the time, like you say, through the nervous system, that kind of nervous system activation there as well.
Yeah, resist gravity. Gravity is a temptress. Just you can do it. Just let your body go all the way down. And if you just resist a little bit, you'll feel it. You know when you're engaging the muscles at that point. And I always tell my students, if I finish the class and I'm more tired than you are, then you're relaxing something there that shouldn't be relaxing, because I'm not demonstrating the whole time. So if I'm more tired, it's a bad sign.
Good point.
It's a threat.
Because I mean, like we say, like some passive stretching isn't necessarily bad, is it? And for me, it seems that might be helpful sometimes for students with less mobility who are kind of tending towards being stiffer or tighter. But I know certainly for me, it just feels really unpleasant, actually.
Yeah, I can see what you mean by unpleasant. It is. You get the shaky muscles and you just really want to resist your mind that just wants to do it. It's just like, let's just do it. We can do this pose. Why worry so much? But you are right. Like I will put passive stretching in my relaxation, my own relaxation, my students' relaxation. It tends to be a bit more passive. I love a happy baby pose. There's not really much you can activate there. You're just meant to enjoy it and relax in it. But as Judy said, like when you're building up the sequence, when you're working towards something, then active stretching and Vinyasa and Ashtanga will help keep the joints safe and in place a little bit.
And I mean, apparently, like I wouldn't be able to cite a study or anything, but I read that studies are beginning to show that over the long term, that active stretching actually increases flexibility, which is one of the things that we think that we're doing, or that we're kind of seeking in a kind of physical asana based practice is more flexibility or more mobility. And apparently working with the active stretching longer term, like short term, maybe a little bit unsatisfying because you don't go as far as you would really like, but over the long term. So when we start thinking about, because for me, one of the things is I want a sustainable practice. I want to be able to do this crazy bonkers strong physical practice for a long time. Like, you know, with the body that I have. So it's been about figuring out how to use that, how to work sustainably as well, play that long game.
Just it's just that getting that ego to stay quiet for the first few times, and then when you start seeing the benefits of it, because it'll also, if you're doing active stretching, you'll feel stronger over time, because with the muscle engagement comes the building the muscle. So different poses like balancing, for example, you'll start feeling that strength if you're doing active stretching and active engagement of the muscles in a balance. It'll build that balance so much quicker than if you're just relying on gravity to hold you on one foot, put one foot on the floor and then that's it. So it does become gratifying very, very quickly. It's just getting over that little speed bump, like whoop. Yeah.
I think that's possibly a metaphor for just about anything we could think of there. That once you go over the speed bump, then yeah, we're good.
That's where you go. It's just a speed bump. Just get to the other side, and that's it. Take your time. Get to the other side. So you're not going to get there tomorrow. You might not get there in a week, but you will get to the other side. It's just a very long speed bump.
maybe it's multiple speed bumps, like one after the other.
Reminds me of hill walking in Scotland.
Oh yeah, the false summits.
Oh, breaks my heart every time.
Yeah. Oh well, listen, I think that might be quite a nice place to stop with your speed bump analogy. So thank you so much for taking time out your afternoon to chat. And your workshop, Saturday, 30th of October.
Yes.
2 o'clock. 2.
No, it's the morning.
Is it the morning?
10:30, I think it is. I'll double check that for you, but I think it is 10:30 in the morning.
See, if we were real pros, Anna, both of us would have checked that out before we actually hit record. we'll check it out, and I'll put it in the notes and whatnot. But people, definitely Saturday, October 30th. Yes. Anyway, and it's live for booking on the website, and it's specifically to do with shoulders, and it's Anna, you talking about smart movement around the shoulder joint. So I'm super excited. I think it's going to be really valuable for so many people. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. Cheers.
Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our chat. If you've got any questions, you can email me or find us on social media. And until we can return to our Sunday chai sessions in the studio, I'll see you here next time.